All right, we are back, everyone. I hope you're still laughing at those jokes. I know you are, but we're here right now with Jim Buchanan, the CEO of Cadient, which is one of our sponsors and is a provider of recruiting tech specifically aimed at distributed hourly workforces. So, Jim, welcome.
Thank you, Vadim. Nice to be with you.
Yeah, and so Jim and I are going to talk a little bit right now about how we can fix how we hire hourly workers. But feel free, as always, like I said, to post questions for Jim as we chat, and we'll get to them, I guess, throughout our conversation. Let's see what the people have to ask you, Jim.
Okay, sounds great.
Yeah, but I have some questions of my own though. So I printed them out like a good journalist, right? So why don't we get to it, right? The obvious question, at least for me, is that this session is called "Let's Fix How We Hire Hourly Workers." So first question, right? What's broken? And before you answer that, I'd love to know whether whatever is broken actually ever worked in the first place.
Good question. I think what's broken in our process is the decision-making part of it. I think we've done a pretty good job in HR of getting candidates, acquiring candidates, and providing our hiring managers with a lot of options, a lot of people to choose from, although that's what hiring managers always complain about. But once we get a lot of those candidates, we recently did a survey of over 1,100 hiring managers, and surprisingly, 71% of them said, we're not confident in the hiring decision that we just made. So that's where the process breaks down, I think. And that hiring manager is, if they're responsible for the hiring and the operations, they're very busy and they have a 1,000 things to do every day. Hiring is one of those things. And oftentimes they just are pressured into making a decision. And I think they feel some anxiety about it. And I think that's where it breaks down.
Yeah. Did it ever work? You know, the other part of my question, like, did things ever work correctly to begin with? Or was this just always a faulty process?
I don't think it's ever worked as well as it could. And the evidence of that is when you look at the employee turnover numbers, look at industries where we have a high concentration of hourly workers, like retail, restaurants, hospitality, construction, manufacturing. The turnover rates are high. They're 50, 60, 70%. And sometimes those are the numbers from the BLS, and the actual numbers are often much higher than that. So I think it's a process that needs to be, we say that we want to revolutionize it, and it's something that can be fixed, but I don't believe it ever has been fixed.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit, like, what are some of the challenges that companies face when they receive a high volume of applicants, but little time and information to evaluate them? And by challenges, what I really mean is not the obvious ones, which are, of course, lack of time and lack of information, like I just said, but the actual impact of what happens in recruiting departments and at organizations, just more broadly, when recruiters can't possibly manage such high volume. Like, in other words, how does this problem manifest in terms of outcomes?
Yeah, I think the way that it manifests itself, a couple ways, really. Let's start with the candidate first. Mm-hmm. It can be a bad experience for the candidate, because if you apply for a job and you're one of 100 or you're one of 200 candidates, there's a good chance that nobody's going to look at your application. And there's a good chance that no one may communicate with you and you think you're the perfect candidate for that job. You put your application in, nobody ever got back to you. It's a bad experience. It's a bad reflection on your place of business because of that. From the hiring manager standpoint, most of the people, and we specialize in distributed hourly hiring. So we have managers all over the place that are doing the hiring, but they also have other responsibilities. They're not really that well trained in the hiring aspect of their job, but they are under pressure to get that position filled. And sometimes they'll make a hasty decision in order to fill the job because you have operational needs. You've got guests that need to be served. You've got people that need to be sold to. You've got attendants that have to do their job. So you have to fill that job. You have to do it very quickly. And you probably, I mean, let's face it, you get 100 applicants, you're not going to look at all 100. So it really, what happens is you don't get the best, you don't make the best quality hires. Therefore, the process starts all over again in 2 or 3 months, and you're right back in the same position you were before. And that has an impact on the business because turnover is costly. And when you have inexperienced employees that are turning over quickly, that's a big hit to the bottom line for the business.
Yeah, for sure. And by the way, one of the points that you just made, or like, I guess the theme of this whole conversation around the lack of time to review resumes, right? Coincidentally, we actually just posted today on ERE.net around an article about the 6-second resume scan and the implications of that and where it came about. So I obviously encourage everyone to always be reading ERE.net, right? So let me ask you this, many people think that recruitment process automation, right, can solve challenges related to high volume of applicants. But I know that you have a more nuanced take on this. Like, you don't believe that this is the panacea others believe it to be. So, like, tell me about that. What are your thoughts on that?
The reason I think recruitment process automation is great, and there are steps in any recruiting process that are sort of tedious, mundane tasks that can be automated, and recruiters can gain efficiency and productivity by having those things automated. However, recruitment process automation in most cases means that we're going to create an automation process that will learn to recruit the way you have recruited in the past. What has happened when you recruited in the past? Well, you've experienced turnover. Maybe it's 100% or more. Do you really want your system to be trained to copy that? Do you want to institutionalize that practice into your business? So our belief is, and our practice within Cadient Talent is, you have to go a step further. You have to look at what is really effective recruiting. How are you getting the highest quality hire? You haven't been, if you're honest with yourself and you have a high turnover, you have not been getting the highest quality hire. So let's create a system. Let's make recruitment automation do that quality hire. That's the goal that we're after.
Yeah, and I like your point that you were making about if you've already had a bad hiring process, automation will just automate your bad hiring process, essentially, right?
Right.
Yeah.
No. You can make bad hires faster. I don't know who wants to do that, but they would allow you to do that.
Yeah, and so it goes to something that I've always said, which is that technology is not a solution, but it is an enabler of solutions, right? And that's really important. So, this session is obviously, about taking a data-driven approach to hiring hourly workers, which begs the question, what data is most important to do this negatively? And, because I'm such a negative person, I'd also love to know which data is unimportant or less important when making hiring decisions.
Yeah, it's unfortunately, Vadim, I have to answer, it depends. But let's break it down this way. I mean, there are obvious certain bits of data that you cannot use in your hiring process. You don't want to use age, you don't want to use gender, you don't want to use ethnicity. You really don't even want to use names. You don't want to be analyzing the names of people because there are some connotations around ethnicity, sometimes around names. So you obviously exclude all of that data when you're building a machine learning algorithm. All that gets excluded. But the beauty of the machine learning and the algorithms is that algorithm, as you process the data that you have, it will tell you what data is valuable and what data is not valuable. So we're looking at, what we're trying to do is find out which candidates possess the same characteristics that your best employees possess and match those candidates to your best employees. So we're looking at, when you collect an application, you get about 100 bits of data. A lot of it you just don't want to use. You can also derive data from the bits of data you collect. Like, for example, how long is the commute time from where the person lives to where they work? If you're paying $12 an hour, and it's a 50-minute commute, that person is not going to stay on that job very long. It just economically, it doesn't make any sense. So they may take the job, but they're not going to be a long tenured employee. So, I mean, there's some things that just kind of, in our client base, sometimes education doesn't make any difference as to whether that person is going to be successful in that job. But it also depends on the job. Sometimes it's very important to have good communication skills. It might be very important to, be able to pay close attention to detail if you're in some kind of a pricing capacity or something like that. Other things that in most of our clients you would think would make a big difference, but it has not in terms of relevance. Are you currently employed? I would have thought that that's going to be a big driver in whether you're going to be a successful employee. It really doesn't matter that much in the kinds of jobs that we're looking at. So it depends on the job. It really depends on the company. But the beauty of it is you don't have to figure that out beforehand. As the machine learning takes place and you're processing your data, it's telling you this is what's ranking high in terms of the data bits.
Yeah, and you mentioned a moment ago about quality of hire, and I know that, and I think you agree with this, right? You want to look at post-hire data to determine, of course, that quality of hire. Do you feel that companies do that enough? And I'm wondering, when they do that, are they looking at, not, because I find that what sometimes happens is that companies will look at their high performers and look at those traits, and they'll assume that those are the traits that are associated with high performance. But it very well may be that when you look at your low performers, they might exhibit those same traits. So you're not really identifying the unique traits for high performance, as especially as this all ties into quality of hire. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are about this in terms of looking at post-hire data.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Vadim. It's important you have to look at some post-hire data to get a feel for, how do you evaluate a particular candidate? It's far from perfect. I mean, you may have some certain traits or characteristics that people possess, but they're not going to turn out to be, a very high performing employee. What you're trying to do here is that you're trying to improve your odds. You're trying to improve the probability that this hire is going to turn out to be a great employee. So it's either rely solely on the hiring manager to do that, or to rely on we don't like to use the term artificial intelligence because we don't think it is artificial. We think it's augmented. It's a pre-processing of candidates to see which of those candidates really have these kind of characteristics and traits that we want in our workforce. So the poor local hiring manager that has so many responsibilities, they don't have a chance to look at hundreds of candidates, but the machine never gets tired. The machine never takes a break. It just processes things very quickly, and it will surface the people who have the best probability of becoming a great employee. It's going to make mistakes, but it learns from mistakes. So if we make a recommendation and you hire somebody and it turns out to be that it's not that great of an employee, the data is there, and the algorithms are going to take that into account when it makes the next recommendation. So it's really a fascinating process.
Yep. I want to get to a question. We have a question that came in.
Yeah, sure.
This is from Brittany Bassler. So in regard to implementing an RPA that can get you the highest quality hire, what do you recommend, or what have you seen works best?
Good question. Thank you for that. What we have seen that works best is just give us your data, and don't make any pre-assumptions about what the right bits of data are. And then if we look at your candidate data, we look at your post-hire data, and for us, the way we start is we just start simply with tenure. And that's an assumption. It's a reasonable assumption, but it's a little bit of a stretch. The assumption is that if the person has worked for you for a long time, then they must be a pretty good employee, and they must be engaged in their job. There could be exceptions to that, but that's a pretty good measure of a quality hire in terms of how that person is performing. So we just take the data, we take all the bits of data that we collect, we take all of the employees that you have, and we run the models, and we see what is the best predictor of data. And it's very, I thought that I would know I've been doing this for a long time. I thought I would know every bit of data that would predict a quality hire. And some of it is logical, some of it you can figure out, but there are some things that you would not have guessed that would be the case. But when you really drill down and think about it, yeah, that makes sense that would be a good predictor. So it's real. If somebody comes to you and says, we have a model that's already developed and it's a standard model off the shelf and it's going to work for your company, I'd be a little leery of that. I mean, there are, we have situations where we have new clients and they want us to help them with their decision support. We call our product Decision Point. But we run it against a industry index with real data until we have enough data from that client to really be able to process the data properly. So I think it's just, I've rambled a little bit, I'm sorry, but I think to answer the question, we got to analyze the data first and foremost.
You know what I could have predicted? I could have predicted this question coming in from the audience, this next question.
Okay.
So, and I'm glad that this was brought up. So, Rebecca McCormick asks, she's curious about, isn't this kind of counter to diversifying your workforce, right? And then Tiffany Easter also said, asks, like, how do you prevent bias? I'm sure that this is an issue that you've encountered from other people before. So
yeah, I could have predicted that. I could have predicted that question as well. And it's a good question, and it's great that people are cognizant of that and concerned about that. The reality is, though, that with a system such as this, you can mitigate bias better than you can in just the normal process of recruiters or hiring managers interviewing people, making hiring decisions based on looking at applications and having interview meetings. Why is that? It's because you're excluding, the machine doesn't know. We don't give it the data for the machine to know what the gender of the applicant is. The machine doesn't know the age. The machine doesn't know the race. The machine doesn't know anything that we don't want it to know about that applicant. You want to trust your hiring managers that they're going to make the right decisions, that they're going to do it in an unbiased way. And I would say, by and large, most people do follow that and they try to do it. But we're basically eliminating that in a machine learning algorithm. So it is much less biased than it would be if humans were doing it, because we're just not feeding that information to the system. In terms of diversity, that's a very interesting topic, because you can, within a machine learning system like this, you can check on the diversity. You can check to see, look, is it recommending candidates in some kind of adverse way? Are we recommending more of a certain gender than another? Or is there a job related reason for that? Probably not. It would be rare to even try to support something like that. But you can test the system to see, okay, do we need to change something here to make it? We want our workforce to be more diverse because we believe that diverse workforces are more productive. So we can program that into the algorithm to make sure that we are accomplishing that objective.
Yeah. Jim, we're about at time. Any just parting words? Like if there was one overarching piece of advice that you could give companies around hiring hourly workers, what would that one grand, big, concrete, practical takeaway be?
Okay. Well, first of all, I would say a lot of people think that high turnover in an hourly workforce is just a cost of doing business. There's nothing you can do about it. It's going to be high. You just have to deal with it. And I challenge that. I don't believe that's the case. I think it can be managed much better than what it is, but you have to, what we're trying to do is we're trying to find the right people for the right job, people who are going to stay on the job and be productive, but also give a person an opportunity to work in a job that they find enjoyable and that they're going to engage in that job. That's a win-win situation. So that's what we're trying to create with our decision point model. And that challenges the norm that, hey, it's just a crapshoot. I'll go back to my original statement. 71% of the hiring managers said, I don't know if this person's going to work out. I don't have very high confidence that my hire is actually going to work out. That's not a good way to run a business, because usually it doesn't work out. So I would just say challenge the normal thinking that, hey, high turnover just is what it is, and it's a cost of doing business.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, Jim, that's about all the time we have. So yeah, thank you so much for being, here at ERE Digital. Thank you to Cadient for being a gold sponsor of the event. Thanks so much.
You're welcome, and great questions, Vadim. Thanks for
and thank you all. Speaking of the questions, they weren't even all from me. Thank you to all of you for writing those questions in, and keep doing that for other speakers. So